Hello, and welcome to our session on From Proof of Concept to Impact. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Carrie Tharp. I lead up strategic industries at Google Cloud, and what that means is looking after all of our products, solutions, and partnerships to help drive business value across all the different industries that we work with. I have teams of experts that come from industry that have been practitioners, users, buyers of all the technology you're hearing about today, and help construct that in a way that helps you get to value faster. Today, I'm also joined by Matthew Kropp, who's the Managing Director and Head of BCGX. So we'll have Matthew share a little bit about kind of what BCGX is if you're not familiar, and the scope of work there.
Great, thanks. Good to see everybody. Matt Kropp, I'm the CTO of BCGX. BCGX is part of BCG. You're all familiar with BCG, the strategy consulting firm. You may not be familiar that we have 3,000 engineers as part of our BCGX group that is entirely focused on building AI solutions for our clients. So we have BCG teams that are out doing strategy work, doing change work, alongside of our software developers that are actually building solutions.
Great. So that might be new news to some of you, but it sounds like you are working with hundreds of customers each year on kind of what's next in innovation for them. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and what the trends are in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I love this topic. Generative AI is amazing. I actually started my career in 1995 in the internet, and it feels very much like we're sort of 96, 97 for those of you that are my age. This topic has gone from zero to just amazing over the course of the last year. And I would say in January, February of last year, we really were not talking to clients at all about generative AI, or at least they weren't interested. And starting about March, just the phone started ringing off the hook. So we had, last year, 3,000 companies call BCG asking for us to help come talk to them about their Gen AI strategy. I personally had 150 conversations, so this is with CEOs and boards, executive teams about their Gen AI strategies. And I'll say last year, if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, Gen AI was the very top of the hype cycle. I would say now we're entering the trough of disillusionment because everybody's very, very interested last year. This is, this technology is just unbelievable. Executives were amazed at what it could do. And now they're saying, okay, where are the dollars? We thought that this was going to change everything, and we thought that we were going to get lots of impact, and we're not seeing that. We did a survey at the end of December and asked executives where Gen AI was in their priority list, and something like 95% of executive teams said it was one of their top 3 priorities for this year. And we also asked them, are they satisfied with what they're getting out of Gen AI, and 65% said no. So we're in this moment where everybody is really asking the question, we see this great potential, but how do we actually get value from it? So maybe I can offer a bit of a framework since I'm a consultant and that's what we do. I would say there are 3 things that everybody needs to be focusing on, and the companies that are really doing well and really starting to see an impact are following these 3 things. So the first is picking the right opportunities, and maybe that sounds silly, but a lot of effort, at least last year, was experimentation. There was a lot of sort of let the 1,000 flowers bloom. Let's survey the whole company and see what everybody's ideas are. That doesn't necessarily lead you to things that create impact. So really finding the ways that you're going to impact the company and picking the right bets is number 1. And part of that, I would say, is not focusing on use cases. In my team, I've banished the term use case. Everybody talks about Gen AI use case. I'm sure there's been lots of use cases discussed today. There's nothing wrong with use cases or technology, but it's too narrow of a focus because Gen AI is going to create impact because it changes the way we work, because we change a process, because we take work out. And so we need to not just focus on the tech, we need to focus on how the tech impacts the process. So finding the right places to go, focusing on processes, not tech, is the first. The second is none of this works if people don't adopt. And so we have to be focused on the people issues, and there's a lot of people issues. there's all the press. I don't know how many people in here have your own personal P-doom. Like there's a lot of discussion about, is this going to destroy jobs? What's it going to do to society, et cetera. So we have to address that head on. And then the third thing is you have to run this as a program. If it's just a bunch of isolated experiments, where the tech teams are, building RAG chatbots, you're not going to get impact. You actually have to think about how do you drive this at the enterprise scale.
And what are some of your recommendations for the construct of a program? So what does that actually look like if folks out here are thinking, wait, I have a scattershot 20 use cases going right now. Yeah. How should they think about program?
So first of all, so program means you've got a vision. It means you have an ambition. It means that you've got executive sponsorship at the top. The programs that we're seeing that are really high impact right now, I'll give you a couple of examples. This is both in the financial services space. It's a company that has the top of the business set an objective to take out a third of the call center cost. This is $100 million a year of cost by 2025 using Gen AI. That's a very ambitious goal. I mean, that's essentially saying we're going to create a chatbot and a voice bot that deflects 30% of the call volume that's coming into our call center by the end of this year. And we started in January. So setting a very ambitious goal mobilizes the whole organization. It's gotten everybody's attention. So we have all of the participation of all the different engineering groups that are required, and we're pushing really hard to make that happen. Maybe another example, also in financial services, the top of the company has set an ambitious 3-year goal to take out $1 billion of cost, again, using Gen AI across the entire bank. So that's key. What's the goal? Then having a tracking, measurement. What are my initiatives? How much do I expect them to be worth? What's the ROI? Is it going to return an ROI? How mature is it? What are the milestones? Am I making progress against those milestones? So having a PMO, having program tracking is really critical. And then, very close to your heart, you have to have the right partners. So what is your partner strategy? You have to have the right tech platform and data platform. I think there's been a lot of, there are new technologies here. And so the tech teams are rightfully looking at what are the right technologies, but you should have a clear strategy in place. And the final thing is you need to have responsible AI. So we've got to have the right governance as you put this in place, that you're not taking risks.
Yeah. And I think, as you called out, platform becomes important, because if you're not going after individual use cases and you're thinking more holistically how to transform a process, go after an entire function like marketing and transform the way that team's operating, you need to have a platform that's going to allow you to traverse multiple use cases in a more programmatic way. And so thinking about what is not just this model or this data set that I need becomes very important. So one of the things we're seeing with our Gen AI black belt, so kind of our specialists we're deploying against biggest accounts, 80% of what we're seeing go to production is when it was approached in a more programmatic-based thinking. So building a data foundation related to a series of use cases or a function or a process, rather than just picking off, I'm going to do this hack and get this one thing going. And so looking holistically at that data, not using Gen AI as a solve for a poor data foundation. So it does allow you to unlock all that unstructured data, but still, if you don't have the right kind of customer data understanding underneath that, product, supply chain, et cetera, we're seeing folks kind of get stalled on those different use cases.
100%. Maybe we could talk about how to pick the right use cases, the right opportunities. So we talk about 3 different kinds of opportunities for generative AI. It's those where you deploy, those that you reshape functions, and where you really reinvent or invent new capabilities. And each has a role for companies in their portfolio. Like as you think about a program, what's the portfolio of initiatives that I want to have in that program? So deploy is just implementing software. So this is implementing you're implementing Bard or your favorite chat environment, implementing code completion for your software developers, implementing Workday's latest Gen AI capabilities. All the software in your organization is going to have Gen AI in it within, it either has it now or will within the next year. And so organizations need to be putting that in place. They should not expect to get a lot of productivity out of it. It's sort of like we all believe that email is really important, but it's really hard to point to what is the productivity lift we got out of email. But it's important to deploy these tools because all of the employees in the company need to learn how to use this stuff. We all know how to use Google. We don't all really know how to use a chatbot effectively yet. We will, and people will learn, but they're not going to learn unless they use it. So you have to have those tools in their hands. But don't expect to get a bunch of impact from that. To get savings, impact, get efficiency, it's really about reshaping functions. And so that is pick a process, so whether that's sales or marketing or finance or legal or HR, and look at the way that work is done, so what do people do, and identify the parts of those processes where Gen AI can automate. And then implement the tools. And that might mean buying something, it might mean building something. And that's where we get involved in a lot of builds is there. It's building custom tools that are specific to a company that take out labor as part of the function. And if you have ambitious goals about how you're going to get that impact, that's where you're going to do that. The third opportunity is this idea of inventing. If we think about it, we didn't have this technology. It didn't exist 2 years ago. So there's a whole new technology that didn't exist. So every business should look at their business and say, how would our business be different now that we have this technology? If you're in software, of course, you better be building it into your product, right? But even if you're, we had a conversation with a commercial real estate janitorial company, the biggest janitorial company in the country. And the CEO was really excited because he said, we have a big problem. We hire 25,000 people a year. And managing the hiring process and then managing the onboarding process. And these people the janitor shows up to a building, they don't know where the broom closet is, and they get embarrassed and they quit. If I could support that process of recruiting and hiring and onboarding and supporting, that would be transformational for my business. Another example is L'Oreal, and they've come out publicly with this. They created and we worked with them on this, a virtual beauty assistant. So they have their premium brands, they have retail locations, and so in a retail location you can have a salesperson that helps a customer, but they also have mass market brands where they have no retail. And so for those brands, it's actually difficult to support a customer. How do you give them advice? You can't do that at scale with people, but you can do it at scale with a chatbot. And so they have a chatbot that is a beauty sales assistant that you chat with. You give it a picture, it analyzes your face and your skin, it recommends products, you can ask it questions. So it's a whole new way for them of selling. And I think every business should be thinking about what is it that they can invent that creates a new competitive advantage for them.
Yeah. And I think one of the themes you guys may have been noticing over the course of the last couple of days is a lot of folks starting on the practical use cases first. So kind of things we would say that are in that optimized bucket. So how do I do customer service a little bit better? How do I improve conversion on the site better? And I think it remains to be seen what's coming in the reinvent bucket for each of the industries that's out there. We're seeing a lot of folks kind of manage their way into those use cases. So how do you break down the future of conversational commerce and retail and just start with improving the chatbots that we all know today? So kind of those deterministic flows, we've all had horrible experiences. I always say, get me to human very quickly because I already know my issue is not going to be in their predetermined flow. And so you have consumer perception in a lot of these industries or patient perception, as an example in healthcare, that you're going to have to overcome to get to some of these future state experiences. So are there any industries that you're working with right now that you feel like are particularly really pushing the needle on the future of transformation?
So it's been interesting. The industry that has leaned in the most was not what I expected. It's insurance. And you think of insurance as a very risk-averse, sort of stodgy industry, but every insurance company is going in quite aggressively here. And I think it makes sense because their business is documents. I mean, their business is contracts, essentially, and there's sort of nothing more to it. So they see it as an existential issue. I think consumer products, of course, are going to be huge. As you said, everything around customer interaction, everything around marketing, personalization, this is going to have a really big impact. But insurance is the one that has moved the fastest.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well, so that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about part of getting to impact is all the people and process that you talked about. We're also seeing with a lot of customers kind of potential resistance or lack of process or support in the C-suite or the board. So boards are also figuring out what does this all mean. They may not know what the models are, the different platforms. So how are you seeing that evolve, and how do you recommend to folks in the room to help create that alignment so that their programs can be successful?
Yeah, so two very big issues. Maybe let me start with the people one, and then we can talk about getting management alignment in the board. So we've done some studies here that I think were interesting, and some of you may have seen. We did BCG published a study with Wharton and Harvard around, they did a scientific study around the impact of Gen AI on knowledge workers. They actually did an experiment and took 75 of our consultants, tested them, and then gave them a task. And half of them got to use a chatbot, and half of them just used their own brain, essentially. The ones who used the chatbot were, not only were they 25% more productive, they got 25% more done, they were 40% more accurate. The quality of their output was better, which was actually a really surprising finding. And so this is, one of the things I talk to boards and executive teams about is, look, there's actually some evidence here that this stuff actually does, really helps. But the other finding in the study was interesting. They also did the same approach, but with a task that the model was not good at. They sort of constructed a task that the model would give you the wrong answer, essentially. And when they repeated the study, the people that used the Gen AI tool did 25% worse than the others, because essentially they trusted the wrong answer out of the tool. So the implication, and they didn't know it, right? So we as humans haven't really learned quite how to use these tools yet. So it's really important that we're picking the right places to apply the tools. Another element here, so we also did a bunch of work coming out of COVID and with work from home and hybrid work and so forth, looking into what keeps people engaged at work. And maybe not surprisingly, the finding was when you do things that improve productivity, essentially it doesn't change people's engagement. When you do things that improve joy, their enjoyment at work, it actually increases engagement quite a lot. It's sort of an obvious statement, like if I make you happier at work, you'll be happier at work, right? But the thing is, when we talk about Gen AI, we're talking about these great tools that are going to make you more productive. And I would say what your employees are thinking is, great, these are the robots coming for my job. So we think the right way to position this is not efficiency. It is minimizing toil and maximizing joy. When I look at your job, say I take a call center. So we actually were working with a tech company that I think should know better. And they had implemented a chatbot for their customer support reps. And then they were surprised that only 15% of the customer support reps were using the chatbot. And we said, well, it's kind of obvious, right? They know the reason why you're implementing this chatbot is because you're going to reduce their job. So why are they going to use it, right? So instead, the right framing is to say, let's look at what's the work that you're doing. And this can be anything. It can be a software developer. It can be a consultant. It could be an office worker. What's your job? What's the toil? What's the part that you don't like to do? It's a lot of manual work. Maybe it's administrative tasks. And by the way, it's the thing that we can automate with Gen AI. And that's what we automate. And then look at the part of your job that is where you get joy. Why do you like your job? Don't automate that. We want to keep that human. And also, there are other parts. There are things that I want the human because I want their ideas. I want diversity of ideas. I want the human because it's risk management. And so I think, again, moving away from this mindset of I have a tool, I'm going to implement a tool, to I have a process. How do I reshape that process in a way that, yes, I get efficiency, so I don't need as many people, but now the people that I have working, actually their job is better. They're doing the stuff that they like to do, and I'm getting the best out of them. I'm getting their creativity and their humanness.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that in Google's experience was we first started using these capabilities with our own engineers. And it was that perfect example of the first metric we saw move was actually developer satisfaction. Yeah. Before we saw a change in kind of their efficiency of code check-in. Now we go back and look at the stats. They're seeing 55% faster completion on any new task, new code generation, 40% faster on routine tasks. And it becomes a part of positioning to all, because when you think of Google, you think we have endless problems for our engineers to work on. So the goal was not necessarily how do we get less engineers, it's how do we get to all the things that we couldn't do before because the programs and projects were taking longer than we would like. So now it's about redeploying those resources and how you drive that through your organization as a positive. I think marketing's another great parallel. We have a lot of marketers deeply asking these questions. It's talked about as one of the areas most disrupted by generative AI. And it may be true that there's certain tasks like writing a marketing brief that no longer you don't need a junior marketer to do that, but that person could be working on kind of the next evolution of analytics related to their digital media spend, and you're getting resources to higher value added tasks for the enterprise. So wondering if you're seeing that as well, of redeployment, it's expansion of that capital roadmap, you're being able to pull in projects. Are boards and C-suites talking about that?
100%, and it's a great example. Yeah, I mean, if your engineers had 30% or 50% more time, does that mean you'd have less engineers? No, you would just do more, right? You all have an endless roadmap of features that you want them to work on. And I think most jobs are like that. I think there are some jobs, call center jobs, I think a lot of them are going to go away, frankly. Because as you said, chatbots, up until now, chatbots pretty much suck. Going forward, chatbots are actually going to be really good. And I think as consumers, we're going to say, I don't want to wait on hold. I'm going to go to the chatbot because it's going to resolve my issue right away. I don't have to, there's no hold time. But I think that is the discussion. And with going back to this idea of needing to think about a program, that's the discussion that has to happen. What's the objective that we're trying to achieve? And what is the objective we're trying to achieve by function? So I might say in engineering, I'm not looking for cost savings. I'm looking for velocity. I'm looking to innovate faster. Maybe my call center, I say, yes, I'm looking for cost savings. Maybe in marketing, I don't think, maybe I'm going to take out a few jobs because I don't need the junior person to write the marketing brief. But marketing is going to change. Marketing is going to be much more about personalization. We're going to generate far more content. I mean, we already are, but with Gen AI, it's just going to go exponential. So I don't know that marketing is going to be about taking labor out. It's going to be about doing much more personalized. So I think that's the discussion that you have to have. It's for each function, what are we trying to achieve? What's the outcome that I want? Might be cost savings, might be velocity, might be more revenue. And that's then what you need to be going after.
Yeah. And I think one of the things everybody should also be thinking about is the journey to get the teams there. So when we talk about generative AI, I always say that we are cooking, not baking. It's not a set recipe. Many of these different tasks that you're going after, processes, there's multiple different ways to use our technology platform, different components in Vertex to get after that value. The first time your team may pick the wrong way. So our AI black belts often come into a customer and find out, oh, wait, we've applied vector search where it should be enterprise search and vice versa. We don't quite have the grounding right. And so then the results that they're seeing from a generative standpoint don't seem enterprise ready. They don't feel like they're going to get the impact out of it. And so helping the organization go through the process of understanding fail fast, move quickly, understand your end program goals, what are those objectives, and how do you kind of bring in the right tools and skill sets to be able to deliver.
This is a great thought, and I think there's some emerging work happening right now around how do you get, how do I get the people to adopt? But frankly, we don't know the answers right away. We don't know exactly how to build this, the tool that's going to give you exactly the outcome. Even take software development. So we have code completion, we've got chat. Those are useful tools, but depending upon how you use them, they either are incredibly helpful and powerful, as you said, or people that aren't using them right, they don't get much value out of it. And what we actually see with code completion is right now only about 30% of enterprises have really adopted code generation. And even of those that have adopted, less than half of their developers are using it on a regular basis. So, which is surprising, right? We would think, I don't know how many of you all are using Gen AI code generation. I'm a developer, I use it. I can't imagine not using it. So it seems like, of course, 100% would be using this. But there's all sorts of reasons. It may be I didn't know exactly how to use it. First time I used it, it gave me kind of a cruddy answer, and so I just don't think it's very valuable. Maybe I feel threatened by it. Maybe I feel like, well, I'm such a great coder, how could this possibly help me? So there are all sorts of human failings or human behaviors that get in the way. One of the things that we're seeing working is not coming in and saying, here's exactly how we want your developers to use these tools, but actually encouraging the developers themselves to come up with what are the best ways to use them, and in creating sort of a community of practice where they're sharing, and those developers that have the best ideas sort of get recognized for the fact that they're able to use these tools really effectively. So I think we will start to do that more and more as we bring Gen AI into different processes in business. It's not so much I'm going to impose this tool on you, but rather I'm going to make this tool available to you, and you are going to figure out how to make it work within your own way of working.
Yeah. I also think as leaders in each of your organizations, whether you're in a technology seat or a business seat, is really kind of thinking through how to help your organization through the pace of change. If you think about just models individually, what a model was able to do a month ago versus what it can do now is totally different. And so you may have done a use case and got output that just wasn't going to be viable. I'll use Imagine as an example. Image generation, our first round of Imagine. I'm a former CMO, CDO. I talked to lots of marketers and digital officers that looked at the output and thought, not my brand, not going to happen anytime soon. And by the next time we got to Imagine 2, now people are looking at it and saying, this is actually getting to the fidelity that I would have this do brand assets. I can use it from digital marketing. But if the human behaviors, as you called out, is kind of, I'm now going to be a brand rejecter, you might think, well, I already just looked at that a month or two ago, and it's not something that I'm going to engage my org in. So just thinking through how you guys create exposure in a way that doesn't create fatigue inside your own organizations, because the options are limitless, the value is there, and just making sure the organization understands it's moving faster than any of the other technology pivots we've seen over decades.
And I think one way to think about that, going back to this idea of creating a program and having a portfolio of initiatives, there are some things that you can do that you don't need adoption. I can, in my call center example, I can implement a chatbot, and if the customer goes to the website, interacts with the chatbot, gets their problem solved, they never pick up the phone and call. So I didn't need to I didn't need to convince anybody in the organization aside from putting in place the chatbot, but I don't need to convince anybody to adopt. The code generation we were talking about, I have to actually get the developers to adopt. And so I think having a thoughtful plan where you say there are a couple of initiatives that we can do that we can put in place, we know it's going to have impact, I don't need to convince people to adopt it, and I can prove the value and I sort of pay for the program, right? That if I can go in and take $100 million of costs out of my call center, I've paid for a lot of other initiatives. And then start to go down the line of these are the harder things to implement, and these are the things that are going to require sort of more buy-in and getting past those objections. But I've already created some proof points that we've been successful. The Gen AI can actually do something that is actually putting some money in the bank.
With that, thank you for joining our session. Hopefully you got some insights of this migration to impact. Thanks for joining us.